you meet people along the way, and you know one of the worst things that you can do is let somebody else make decisions about your own life or dictate what you should be doing in your own life. And when I thought back about this, there's so many friends and colleagues and whatever who got into certain jobs because their parents told them to do it. But then, you're 5, 10, 20 years into it, and you're saying to yourself, I'm just working until I retire. And then hopefully I
Yeah.
get a nice pension and I can, live comfortably off of this. But at the end of the day, you need to pursue what fuels you. And for me, I just always knew that it was fragrance. And so, it might start with something small, like starting a social media page and maybe just sharing your passion with the world and seeing what clicks and what kind of interaction and engagement you get from that. And you never know, down the line, a bigger opportunity might manifest or present itself.
I really love, love, love what you do. And perfume means a lot of stuff. We're going to talk about a lot of things that what it means to, own a perfume, put it on you and do all of that stuff. But um, let's just start with how did you get into this kind of work? What inspired you to become a fragrance expert?
You know what it is? I've been into fragrances since I was about 10 years old. And so I think it all started when my mother bought me my very first bottle of eau de toilette, which at the time it was CKB by Calvin Klein. And it's a
Mm.
very smooth, slightly floral, musky fragrance, perfectly unisex in my opinion. And I just wore it all throughout seventh and eighth grade, and it became somewhat of a signature scent for me. And, my mother had never been too technologically savvy. So what happened was she would ask me to order perfumes for her online because she always knew she can get them at a discount online versus walking into a department store. So I would go on all of these websites and I would purchase fragrances for her. And she would say, "All right, as a thank you for you helping me, why don't you go ahead and buy a fragrance for yourself?" So I said, "Ma, there's no smell-o-vision. I don't know what these smell like. I'm not just going to pick a random bottle because it looks good, right? As they say, don't judge a book by its cover." So my mother would kind of give me her insight and her influence, and she would say stuff like, "Well, I have a cousin who wore this, or I smelled this on somebody once, and maybe you should get this one." So I always kind of left it up to my mother to purchase fragrances for, or select the fragrances that should be purchased for me. And so when I was in high school, I had like 30 bottles in my collection. And I was wearing everything from like Givenchy Pie to Paco Rabanne Pour Homme to CK1 and Calvin Klein Eternity. And, as a high school kid, everybody is wearing Axe and Tag and all of these, fragrances that come in a can. And I was the one who was actually wearing the eau de toilettes and the eau de parfum. And so it wasn't until I think 2011 where I really started to dive deep into the world of fragrance because I discovered that there was this alternate universe of fragrance existing in the cosmos, which is niche perfumes. And I said, wow, I didn't know that a lot of these high-end brands really exist. And these are brands that specialize in just fragrances. So, of course, when you're talking about Gucci and Chanel and Dior, they make keychains, they make scarves, they make leather goods, they make, all of the glasses, they make all of these things. But there are certain brands out there that are called niche brands where their specialty is just fragrance. And when I started getting into those brands, an entire world opened up for me.
Wow. Did you always wanted to do this when you grow up, or you just kind of like, I know your mother's introduced you in that, but when you were a child, you never thought that you were going to specialize in fragrance, right? You're probably
You
like, I
know,
want to be a doctor or engineer or something to that fact.
well, I was in education for 10 and a half years. And
Okay.
so I kind of pursued that because my mother used to be a teacher as well. She's retired now. And so I always had a penchant for reading and writing, and I would say I have pretty good command of the English language. So I pursued a career as an English teacher.
Wow.
And I did that for about a decade. But in the background, I always knew that fragrance was this thing that I was so passionate about. And I knew
Mm.
I had to do something with fragrance. I didn't know what it was. And I think it was really 2011, 2012 that catapulted me into pursuing this as more of a career, although
Okay.
initially that wasn't the target objective. I think when I started making videos on YouTube, I did it just so I could show people that I existed. I wanted people to know that here is this fragrance crazed individual that has a pretty decent collection of fragrances, and I have an opinion that I wanted to share. And, I saw all of these other people branching out into different categories, and people would review sneakers and electronic gadgets and all of these things. And I said, I love fragrances, and this is something that I'm really passionate about. So I uploaded my first video, I think it was June 5th of 2012. And right away, I started getting suggestions for future reviews. And people would say, well, do you have this fragrance? Can you review it? Do you have that fragrance? And I noticed that it started to catch on. And so I selected an upload frequency that I was comfortable adhering to. And I just started putting out videos one after the other after the other. And now the social media following grew, and I feel very blessed for that. I have, I think, 271,000 followers on YouTube.
On
I
YouTube, yeah.
have well over 500,000 on TikTok. And it's just all of these platforms are growing simultaneously. And it's just a pleasure to be able to, share my hobby and my passion with the world, and that people actually listen and they engage. And that's one of my favorite things, just engaging with the community.
I think it's so beautiful what you just said, that because a lot of us, and as we grow up, we've always wanted to find our passion. What is my passion? What do I want it to do? We get a job, you have to have a job, and you do. And a lot of people are not happy in their job, and they're very afraid to start something, let alone their passion. They stay in their
Yeah.
job and stuff. So what was kind of like that mindset shift for you when you had a job, you were a teacher, you were doing really good, and then you just like started this as a kind of hobby, as a passion, and you didn't wasn't even looking at it to make it a business or be in the success that you have today. But what if people are listening right now and they're kind of battling between that and saying to themselves, like, you know what, I have this job, I'm good, but I have this passion about this particular hobby of mine or passion of mine, but I don't know how to start. What would your advice would be for them?
Oh my goodness, that's such a beautiful question. Because, I think there are so many people out there that have certain passions situated within their heart, and they know intuitively and instinctively that this is something they should be doing. And maybe they don't possess all the skills at the moment, but, life is an experience in trial and error. And so
Yeah.
even though you might say, or, I really like cars and I want to do something with cars, and, I either want to race them or I want to repair them or whatever, I just don't know where to start. Sometimes, and I know you've had guests on your show in the past who speak about the law of attraction. Sometimes, if you just focus on the end goal and just, as one of my favorite law of attraction guru says, Neville Goddard, he said, the secret to manifesting anything that your heart desires is to master the feeling of the wish fulfilled. So you just have to imagine yourself already having that thing, and it's going to create a bridge of incidents where people and places and opportunities will present themselves to you. And so when I started doing the whole social media thing, I didn't know that it would eventually evolve into, me having an award nominated channel. I didn't know that I would do creative direction for several brands. I didn't know that my fragrances would one day end up in Neiman Marcus. These are all things that just,
Yeah.
exploded my mind when it happened. And I said, wait a minute, it all started with me just knowing intuitively that this is something that I wanted to do. And you meet people along the way, and you know, it- one of the worst things that you can do is let somebody else make decisions about your own life or dictate what you should be doing in your own life. And when I thought back about this, there's so many friends and colleagues and whatever who got into certain jobs because their parents told them to do it. Or
Yeah.
they said, you know what, this is a profitable industry and I think you should do this. But then, you're 5, 10, 20 years into it and you're saying to yourself, I'm just working until I retire. And then hopefully I
Yeah.
get a nice pension and I can, live comfortably off of this. But at the end of the day, you need to pursue what fuels you. And for me, I just always knew that it was fragrance. And so, it might start with something small, like starting a social media page and maybe just sharing your passion with the world and seeing what clicks and what kind of interaction and engagement you get from that. And you never know, down the line, a bigger opportunity might manifest or present itself. And then, in that moment, you have to be able to kind of identify, okay, is this for me? And do I want to go down this trajectory, or do I want to backpedal and maybe do something different? But you'll know. In that moment, you'll have a gut instinct or a hunch that is going to tell you this is something that you ought to be doing, or maybe it's time for you to, hang up the proverbial hat and, do something else. But for me, fragrance has always been this thing where, yeah, like since I was 10 years old, I just knew I had a future in it somehow.
It's not just a manifestation for you. I feel like you had such a fun with it. You when you started it, it wasn't even about the money or it's about getting the successful as you are right now. I've seen your videos from the beginning. Like I went all the way back and I'm looking at you and you have the same enthusiastic personality now when you started. It was like within you. And I mean, technically on the paper you're very successful now and people see you with the followers and everything, but your passion toward it, you can tell even from the beginning you were just having fun, just saying that this is what I like, this is what I want to do, I see where it goes intuitively, I know this is what I want. But people sometimes forget to do that, they get too serious.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think so. When I was in education, I was working 160 hours a month. And
Right.
so, right, 40 hours a week, and then you go home and you're grading essays and you're updating things online and you're calling parents and you're doing all of these things and rewriting curricula and attending this professional development workshop and doing this and doing that. And there's so much work that goes into it. And it's like, oh my God, I'm working 160 hours a week doing something that may or may not pay off. And you're in the classroom and you're reading literature, and some students are participating, but not all of them. And some of them are asleep at their desks, and it happens in every single school, right? Especially when you're dealing with high schoolers and they have other things on their mind. But it's funny because I'll grab a fragrance and I'll say, I'm going to do a video on this. And I get so pumped up and I put myself
Yeah.
in front of the camera and I'm like, I spent the past week wearing this. I know the notes that are in it. I know how it performs. I know the diffusiveness. I know the evolution from top to heart to base. And now I'm just going to share it with the world. And people are actually going to watch. Like
Yeah.
it's so exciting just doing something that feels so second nature to you. It's not
Yeah.
something that's forced. It's not something that you have to do tremendous amounts of study and research into because, well, there is a research component, of course, but the thing with fragrance is that fragrance is art and art is subjective. So, in other words, you can get very technical and mechanical about things, but when you're talking about fragrance, you're talking about something that is very personal. I can't tell you how many times I might review a fragrance. Take this one, for example. It's a very bright, citrusy, floral, oceanic, ozonic fragrance. I love wearing it, especially in the summertime. I'll give my opinion on it. And then you have somebody else come along who says, you know what? I actually don't like wearing that one. For me, I get more woods than florals. Or for me, I
Mm.
prefer it more in the fall than in the summer. And it's just the beauty of subjectivity when it comes to fragrance. For example, I always equate it to the analogy of no two people are going to have the same taste in movies or in literature. I might love reading fiction and somebody else might love reading memoirs. I might love pineapple on my pizza. Somebody else likes pepperoni. And fragrance is the same thing, where it's this exchange of ideas, and people watch the videos, and you don't expect everybody to be 100%, in alignment with your taste, but it opens a discussion for a difference of opinions. And I think having that inclusivity and actually, listening to what other people have to say and their personal take on fragrance is really one of the most beautiful things about the perfume industry, I would say, in the perfume community.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you think that the fragrance have a spiritual and energetic side to it? Because I really believe that they do. Like you said, it's very personal and
Mhm.
is art. And I know perfume is something that we're introduced to and we know about it and we wear it to feel pretty. But I believe that in the deep sense of it, it has some type of a spiritual heaviness to it, an energetic, language to it that it speaks.
You're right. You're 100% right. I think long gone are the days of people subscribing to the notion of fragrance being nothing more than a hygiene product or a means of smelling good or a means of attracting a mate or something like that. Now people are realizing that one, it's a spirit lifter, it's a mood enhancer, it's a pick me up, and it's kind of like Pavlov's dog. right? You ring a bell and the
Yeah.
dog salivates, and
Yeah.
it's like the dog knows it's about to get a treat. With fragrance, let's say there's a day when you're telling yourself, today I'm going to tackle a major fear. I'm going to do something that I've never done before. I'm going to step out of my comfort zone, and I want to associate this fragrance with what I'm about to do. And it's
Mm.
fantastic because you'll spray this fragrance on and you'll go out there and you'll do something that is bold and courageous and gregarious or whatever. And now the next time you wear this one, it might put you in that same mood because it's so closely intertwined with the limbic system and the brain and memory and all of these things. And same thing like when you go on a vacation. I might say to myself, I'm going to go on a vacation and I'm going to wear this perfume because I've never worn this before. So when I smell this fragrance 2, 3, 4 months down the line, I want to be reminded of that summer
Yeah.
vacation that I took. And it does that. Fragrance has the ability to do that more so than visual matters, more so than auditory matters. The olfactory sense is so closely tied to memory.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you, Valerie, how many people, or myself included, how many people wear a fragrance just because they want to put themselves in a more elevated mood,
Yeah.
just because they want their spirits lifted. That, and there's certain ingredients that do that, like there's science that says, vanilla is an aphrodisiac, and cinnamon is really good for, inspiring work ethic, or
Mm.
certain citrus ingredients whet the appetite.
Right.
But for me, there are certain fragrances and compositions and as a whole that whenever I want to put myself in a productive space, or whenever I want to increase, a positive energy, there's certainly fragrances that elevate my mood and they make me, yeah, more productive, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, because I just had somebody about the crystals, and they're, we all wanted to have something that can remind us, like we're empowered, or if we're lacking confidence, like this thing, I'm gonna take the interview with me, or to do something, a sign. Why not perfume? And the other thing that I find it really fascinating, because we're really not using our, like you said, the other senses, like, looking at something or hearing something is more active than smelling something.
Yeah.
But what a way to activate that, and then just to close your eyes and smell it, and you can, like you said, remember that vacation that you went to, or that moment that you were feeling down, and put this perfume on you, and now you're feeling very relaxed and very
Yeah.
yourself. So that's a spiritual part of it, that a lot of people, they experiencing it, but they don't really connect it with each other. But you can tell it has a deep meaning to it when it comes to perfume, because I know I really do. I mean, I'm not a perfume expert, or I don't have a lot of it, but the one that I have, and I got to tell you a story. Okay, I was working in this
Please.
restaurant, and I was a bartender way back in the days, and I was wearing. It was an Indian restaurant. I was a bartender, but Indian food has this strong smell that
Mhm.
when you work in an Indian restaurant, you come back home, you want to burn your clothes after that.
Yeah.
So I always wear this perfume, Chanel Chance. So
Sure.
yeah, it's really, it's a strong at first, but then it kind of like calms down after a while. I kid you not. One of the women used to come to my bar all the time. So I was going to get an ice from the back, and she came and sat at the bar. She didn't see me. Her back was toward me. And she said to my manager, "Oh, Val is working tonight." Because my
Um,
perfume trail was like left when I went to go get an ice. And from the perfume, she knew I was there.
wow.
Because it was, and I literally stopped and I looked. I was like, how did she know I was gonna work tonight? Because it was off night. I was covering for somebody, and I was not supposed to be there. And she used to come to the bar a lot, and she told my manager, Val is here tonight. Val is bartendering. And I went back and I asked her, how did you know I was here? She's like, I smell your perfume.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
see,
That's how it works.
it is so amazing. And from that moment, I actually changed my perception toward perfume, and
Mm.
it became very meaningful to me,
Yeah.
because it kind of represent my identity and who I was, and how I people knew that I was there because of this smell. And we don't really pay attention to it. So I became obsessed with it. And then that's why I was so excited that you're here today, so we can talk about it, because it really does have spiritual and energetic meaning to it, that if we intentionally assign it. to certain perfume.
Absolutely. And you've reminded me of a couple of things. So I'm going to share a couple stories with you. By the
Please
way,
do.
Chanel Chance is such a beautiful fragrance. Whenever I speak to women, they're always telling me two of their favorites are Chanel Chance and Chanel's Coco Mademoiselle,
Yeah.
right? So Coco Mademoiselle is a lot of like rose and patchouli. Chanel Chance is a lot of hyacinth and musk. It's a very clean, floral, elegant, professional perfume. And so I'm sure you were smelling amazing when you were working at that Indian
Yeah.
restaurant. And I can just imagine because I love Indian cuisine. They have a lot
Yeah.
of vegetarian options and, a lot of like saffron and cumin. And, I
Yeah.
grew up on these spices as well. And these also happen to be ingredients in perfumes. But
Perfumes. Yeah.
you've reminded me of a couple of things. So I had a commenter on one of my videos from a few weeks back say that her late mother, used to wear
Mm.
Angel by Thierry Mugler. And
Yes, I
this
know
is
that.
such a beautiful perfume, came out in the early 90s. I'm sure you've smelled it and you know
I
what it
have.
smells like.
Yeah.
And so this is a lot of ethyl maltol, which is a synthetic molecule that kind of smells like cotton candy. So it's
Yeah.
very sugary, it's very sweet, a bit saccharine. It also has patchouli and it has some other ambery tones in the composition as well. And she said that her late mother used to wear this perfume all the time. And what she ends up doing now is she sprays her pillowcase and her bedding. And so when she goes to bed, like she thinks about her mother and she says, when I do that, I feel my mother's energy there. And,
Mm.
when you mention energy, I thought to myself, my goodness, it really is a thing that, can activate a lot of really fond memories for people. And for me, kind of going back to something that I was saying before, you know, I always knew my very first perfume was a Calvin Klein, and this
Yeah.
is when I was 10 years old. But I couldn't remember if it was CKB or CK1.
One.
And I
Right.
said, I remember the silhouette of the bottle, but I don't remember if it was the clear one or the black one. So what I ended up doing several decades later is I went to the Calvin Klein outlets here in New
Mm.
Jersey. And I said, I don't currently have a bottle of CK1 or CKB in my collection, but let me smell them again. I just want to see if I can recollect and remind myself of which one I actually wore. So
Mm.
I said, I'm pretty sure it was CK1 because that was the more popular one. Everybody wore it. It's the first unisex fragrance ever, yourself included.
Yeah, yeah. I still do. I don't know what it is about that. I still love it. And
It's
I don't
it's
I don't wear
beautiful.
it as much, but I used to wear it when I was young, just like you.
Yeah, a lot of citrus, bergamot, lemon, clean white florals. And I said, let me smell it. And it's funny, the rest of my family was shopping with the clothes, and I was in the perfume counter, and I'm smelling CK1, and I'm telling myself, yeah, I think this is the one that I used to own when I was 10. Yeah. Oh, I'm pretty sure about it. Yeah. And then I said, you know what, before I leave the counter, let me also smell CKB.
Right.
And I smelled CKB, and I'm telling you, it was like, that expression, you see your life flash before your eyes?
Yeah.
For me, I had this very vivid memory of owning CKB. And it's funny, when I took that initial sniff, I was reminded of being in my mother's house when I was younger, being in the bathroom on the second floor. I remember the box and it had the top flap ripped off. I remember exactly what I was wearing, this orange Aeropostale uh, t-shirt. And I
T-shirt.
remember, I mean, it's almost like I smelled it and it transported me back several decades. And I said, wow, this was a memory that was so, I suppose, suppressed in my subconscious. And all it took was smelling this fragrance again. And it reminded me exactly of where I was and what I looked like and how I was dressed and what I was wearing. And it's amazing how many memories are still lingering in the back of one's mind
Yeah.
that are waiting to be activated. Like when I think I was in Marshall's or TJ Maxx or one of these stores, and they had a fragrance there that is really hard to find. I don't know if you've ever owned it or smelled it. It's by Gucci. It's called Gucci Rush,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
in a red rectangular bottle.
Yes, 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 yes. I know
So
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, beautiful perfume. It's a fruity floral, and it has a lot of either peach or apricot. And I purchased it because I said, you know what? I know this is kind of hard to find now, and I
Mm.
just I need a bottle of it in my collection. As soon as I sprayed it, I was reminded of my mother getting ready to go out on the weekends. And I said, "Oh my God, my mother used to wear this one." And I called her up and I said, "Mom, did you ever have a perfume called Gucci Rush?" She goes, "Yeah, there was an entire year where that's all I wore." And I'm like, "Wow." So there you go. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's amazing.
It really is amazing if you really pay attention to yourself. And that's another thing. That's another thing. Wearing a perfume, this fragrance that, like you said, you didn't know all these memories that you had from the past, and you put it and it came to you. It's kind of
Yeah.
flash right in front of your eyes. And we should really have that kind of a signature perfume to make us feel like, there's a time, because there's emotion attached to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not so much about the smell, but the emotion. The more emotion we have in a certain events, right? We remember that. Then everything else we forget. Like, for
Hmm.
example, September 11. When you say September 11, everybody remembers what happened in September 11, right? Because
Oh
it was
yeah.
such a, the whole country emotion was in it. So certain perfume that you can assign to you when you have a happy moment, as deliberately, like I got a promotion. I gotta get this perfume sprayed on myself so I can remember. And it really can help you later on in life. That
Yeah.
when you have a self-doubt, or you're lacking confidence, or you feel like you're stuck, or you feel like you can't do that. I mean, I always say to people, because my podcast is all about inner power, your inner power inside that you have within yourself that we really don't realize unless we really test it and we see how much ability we have. So a lot of time when we go through some stuff, when we're young and then we're 40 years old and we worry so much, and you remind yourself like, let me put this perfume. 40 years I did okay, I think I'm going to be okay moving forward, you know
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I'm going to be okay. It's so empowering.
Yeah. It
It
is. We
literally.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we need to be able to have these positive associations. And, unfortunately, it goes the other way too. I
Yes.
remember there was this one time I was in the Soho neighborhood of Manhattan and I was doing some fragrance shopping and I bought a brand new fragrance and it had a lot of rose and patchouli in it. And it's super long lasting too. And I remember I drenched myself in it because I was so excited to wear it. It was a brand new purchase of mine. And then, unfortunately, I received news that my cousin, who was in his mid 20s at the time, had passed away. He had a
Oh, I'm
very rare
sorry.
type of cancer known as Ewing sarcoma. And I just remember I was wearing that fragrance and that's all I was thinking about. And I didn't wear it, not for that reason. I didn't wear it because I just kind of had forgotten to wear it. And then maybe like a week or two later, I put it on again and I was like,
Yeah, and it
I
can.
don't feel good with this one. What is it?
No.
And I had to think about it and I was like, oh yeah, that's what I was wearing the day when I found out that this happened. So,
This
you know,
happened.
when you have these positive experiences, as you mentioned, yeah, it's so important to wear something that is going to uplift you, something where you can mark that occasion and, subsequently in the future go back and say to yourself, oh, yeah, this is something that I associate with a really positive moment in my life. And when people are starting to do that in a conscious manner, I think their appreciation for fragrance will only grow because yes, it's functional and it's this and it's that. And yeah, of course, you should purchase a fragrance because you want to make a good impression at that job interview. You
Yeah.
should purchase a fragrance because you're going out on a date with that beautiful woman and you want to smell good for the occasion. But you should also purchase a fragrance for yourself because you know the ability that it has on your mind. There's so many gentlemen that I speak to who say, "Oh yeah, when I was in the 80s, I wore a lot of Polo Green and Davidoff's Cool Water and Yop and
Mhm.
I know some of these are outdated now, but I still wear them because I want to be reminded of, you know,
Mhm.
that chapter of my life." And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that, encapsulated within fragrance is this element of nostalgia that a lot of
Yeah,
people can't take away from. And so I'm sure you have a lot of fragrances or perfumes that you
I
probably
do.
still wear, right?
I do, but like I said, for me, that's when it changes meaning, because I went through a lot of obstacle in my life, a lot of
Yeah.
challenges. And one of the things that I really suffer from, and I miss, and I hurt me the most was that I always was alone. I
Okay.
started my life in a very young age. I became a mother in a very young age. I figured all my life on my own. Obviously, a million times, fall on my face, got up, and dust myself up and start all over again.
Of
But
course.
I didn't have the opportunity. I didn't have a friend. I came from a country over here in America 32 years ago. I didn't have no friend. I didn't have no family. So for me, I literally did purchase my first perfume when I came to America, right?
Wow.
Because yeah, to me, so that alone itself, right? I was kind of like, this is my ground. This is going to be my home now.
Yeah.
So when I wore that perfume, I feel so pretty. I feel so empowered, and I feel like I'm rich. I feel like, I'm somebody. And I know it sounds stupid to a lot of people, but at the time, that's the only thing that I could have associated myself, because it was within me, like it was like a, what do they call the comfort blanket that little kids, little blanket that kids always have with them,
Yeah,
as a
they're blank
comfort.
gear. Yeah, I
Yeah,
know what you
something
mean.
like that. So to me, that was perfume.
Yeah.
That was perfume. So I went through a lot. So every time when I had a challenge in my life that I felt like I was stuck, that I felt like, oh my God, there go another obstacle that I have to overcome. I remember I would go and I would just smell the
Mm,
perfume. You did okay. You got out of the first challenge. You did okay. You're still alive. You're healthy. You can do this. That's
yeah.
the meaning that I really attached to the perfume, one particular one. But obviously later on, then I was very excited to do other one, for this one to feel sexy, for this one to feel protective, but it meant a lot to me. And that's why, like I said, I was so excited to have a conversation with you, because a lot of people don't see the perfume, like you said, they see the perfume as a being pretty, as great, as like, yes, I want it to smell good, or all that stuff. But to me, it has a more deep meaning than just the perfume itself.
Yeah. You know what it is? I think a lot of people, both women and men, they get into perfumes and colognes and whatever label you want to assign to it because somebody purchases a bottle for them. And I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful, and that's how I got into it as well. But I think a form of self-care is going to the department store and spending a couple of hours and just trying everything and seeing what is the perfume with which I have an emotional connection. And you might be really surprised to discover that there's an ingredient in there that reminds you of something that conjures up a really positive memory or emotion. And I'll give you an example. There's a fragrance called Philosikos by Diptyque. And
Mm,
Philosikos is a Greek word. It's a portmanteau, which means it's a combination of two or more words, and it means fig lover.
mm,
And when I smelled that fragrance for the first time, once again in the Soho neighborhood of Manhattan, I fell in love with it, and I didn't know why. And
mm.
I realized that it contains a fig accord. And I love the smell of fig. I
Yeah.
spent a number of years living in Greece when I
Mm,
was much, much younger. And I had one or two fig trees in my backyard when I was living in Athens. And I remember I would pick up the figs from the ground where they had fallen, and some of them would be bursting at the seams. They were overripe. And I would smell them and occasionally eat them. And I just have such a fond association with that memory, and that note and that smell. And I knew I had to purchase myself a bottle of it because it's such a beautiful perfume. And every time I wear it, it just always lifts my mood. It always elevates my spirits. And it always reminds me of a more carefree time in my life without the bills, without the stress, without the
yeah.
responsibilities, without all that stuff.
Yeah.
And, I think going back to my earlier point, there are so many people that I think still subscribe to the concept of a signature scent, which is fine, right? If you find
Yeah.
one that really works for you, by all means, don't let anybody deter you or discourage you from wearing that fragrance. But, like I'll give you an example. I have this one uncle whom I love, and
Mm,
I know his signature scent is Dracar Noir. And he's
okay.
been wearing it for decades now by Guy Laroche. And if I could give advice to him, I would say, you know, I know you love wearing it and I know it makes you feel really good, but see if you can maybe go to Macy's or, Bergdorf Goodman or Neiman Marcus and try everything in the store, right? And this is
Yeah.
advice that I would give for everybody. Try a little bit of everything. Try to narrow it down to what is the olfactive family that really speaks to you, because you
Mm.
might be into the gourmands, which are the more sweet perfumes. They kind of smell like, something edible. It might be the aromatics, which have a lot of like basil or thyme or tarragon or these herbal ingredients, or it might be a floral fragrance. And then if it is a floral, do you like the clean white florals like jasmine and gardenia and tuberose, or do you like the heady florals like narcissus and freesia and ylang ylang? There's such a vast world of perfumes to discover. It's interesting. I had a cousin who visited me a few years ago, and
Mm.
he walked into my studio, let's call it, and he saw that I had thousands of fragrances in my collection,
Yeah.
and he goes, "Why do you have so many?" I said, "Well,
Yeah.
this is kind of what I do." And he says, "But don't they all smell the same?" So I made it my mission to locate two perfumes that are so diametrically opposed to one another. And I said, "Here, try this and try this. And I want
Yeah.
you to tell me if they smell the same." Because I think that's the misconception with a lot of people, right? It's like, well, cologne just smells like cologne, doesn't it?
Cologne, right.
So I had him try two. One of them is by a brand called Heretic Parfum. It's called Poltergeist. It has a lot of birch tar, which is a type of resin, but it smells like smoke. It smells like a burning forest. And then I don't remember what the other one was, but it was something very bright, airy, fresh, and clean. And he goes, "Oh wow, I never realized that fragrance can smell so different." And so I think people ought to just really put themselves out there, explore their options, and they might end up discovering something that could, and I don't, this is not hyperbole, but I think they could end up finding something that could change their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you answered my question, but I was when I knew you were coming on the show, a lot of people sent me questions. So I'm gonna go over some of the question that
Oh, I'm excited.
oh yes. When we some of them you answer, but somebody asked, how can someone choose a perfume that is right for them if they're first time perfume buyers?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. So I think one of the mistakes that people make is they say, "Oh, I like this note, and I see that this perfume contains this note, so
Mm,
I'm gonna go and try that." Big mistake.
okay.
Note breakdowns are really just a point of departure and a point of education for sales associates. In other
Okay.
words, if you have a perfume that contains, let's say, clove, right? You look at the
Okay.
notes and it says this perfume contains clove. It doesn't actually contain clove. It contains an aroma molecule known as eugenol, which is found
Mm,
in clove, but it's also found in bay leaf, and it's also found in a handful of other raw materials as well. So I'll give you an example. I have this perfume here, beautiful perfume, by the way, and it's by Room 1015 and it's called Jasmine Freak. So
okay.
this is a jasmine-based perfume. It's a beautiful, beautiful fragrance, very natural smelling jasmine. But what a lot of people don't realize is that not every perfume has natural jasmine in it.
Right.
Perfumers have all of these aroma molecules in their perfumer's organ and at their disposal where they can put together a jasmine accord, which means they'll use a lot of synthetic molecules that are made in a laboratory, and it can give the impression of jasmine, but it's not actually jasmine. So, for example, you have a naturally occurring compound known as jasminol, which has just a very clean floral scent. And then you have another ingredient called geosmin, which actually smells like
Mm,
soil. So they'll add a little bit of that to the composition to make it smell a bit earthy. Then you have another aroma molecule called cis-3-hexanol, which smells like grass. So it kind of puts you in the mindset of maybe being in like a jasmine garden. And then you
mm,
have another ingredient called benzoyl salicylate, which adds a little bit of sweetness. So it's to make it a bit more agreeable. And it's funny, you add all of these components together and you smell it and you're like, "Oh wow, this is a jasmine perfume," but there's actually no natural jasmine in there. And also,
uh,
if you compare this fragrance to another fragrance by Thierry Mugler called Alien, that fragrance has an indolic jasmine, which means there's this chemical compound in there known as indole, which actually smells quite musky. And it's
ah,
interesting because a lot of women will spray it on and they fall in love with it. And a lot of women are like, oh, there's something off about this perfume. What is it? But it's
Right.
actually the indole that's in there that makes it smell a bit funky, a little animalic. Some people say a little barnyardy, which is
Uh-huh.
kind of an interesting adjective to use. But my recommendation would be don't look at the notes, don't look at the bottle, don't even think about the brand, because what's fascinating is you might have a brand like Gucci, a brand
Mm.
like Burberry, a brand like, I don't know, I'm trying to be very, let's say Caron. So you'll have three different brands, but guess what? All three of these brands, Caron, Burberry, and Gucci, not Gucci, Dior,
Yeah.
they've all had fragrances made by the same perfumer, and his name is Francis Kirkjohn. So it's amazing to me how somebody will say, "Oh, I like wearing Bulgari fragrances." Cool.
I was literally just gonna say to you, I love Burberry.
Yeah.
I love
And
it.
and it's amazing because like Burberry, they've had fragrances made by a perfumer known as Francis Kirkjohn, another perfumer whose name is Jerome de Marino. So they've had perfumes made by
Wow.
several different perfumers. So don't even look at the brand, don't look at the note
Ah.
breakdown, don't look at anything, don't even judge it by the bottle. Just pick it up, excuse me, spray it, you might actually fall in love with it. So a lot of times people think that it's the brand that they like, or they think that it's the concentration that they like, or it's the note that they like. But, a lot of that, there's a lot more that meets the eye, basically.
Yeah, it's like a singer. They can have like a CD 12 song, but you only like one or two of it, not that necessarily
Yeah,
all of it. Yeah. Wow, that's
exactly.
amazing. Like you said that the same person made all these three brands, but I literally go by the brand. I'm thinking that okay, I like this brand, but it's not really the brand. You should really look into that.
Exactly.
That
It's like somebody saying, "Oh, I love Justin Bieber's music." Okay, but some of his songs were written by Ed Sheeran. Some of his
yeah.
songs were written by John Bellion. He didn't write all of his songs. So, you might like something about, like maybe there's an aesthetic about a brand that people
Right.
really like. And it's like, I really love the Gucci aesthetic. And that's cool, right? If you want to be able to tell yourself that, oh, today I'm wearing a Gucci fragrance, because there is a lot to the label of a
Right.
fragrance.
Right.
But as far as the smell goes, you're not wearing the bottle around your neck, right? It's an
I was just gonna
invisible
say.
accessory. So you want to make sure that it resonates with you and that you actually like the smell. That's what should be paramount.
And that's another thing. Perfumes are so mysterious, right? When you wear it, like you
Yeah.
said, they don't see the bottle, but they always ask you, like, "What are you wearing?" And
Yeah.
that's another
Yeah.
thing because some people can see the bottle and say, "Oh yeah, that's Gucci bottle," but they still don't know you wearing that. They ask you this question.
Uh-huh.
You know,
That's right.
that's really cool about that.
Yeah.
Um, what is a common misconception about perfumes that you hear most of the time?
Oh, that's a really good question. So, there's a lot of people in the community who will say that everything is unisex, that fragrance
Mm,
kind of defies convention and stereotypes. And I agree with that. And I'm going to tell you why.
mm,
You can pick up a fragrance, and this is a very popular fragrance released in the mid 90s, bestseller, still does very well today, composed by perfumer Alberto Morillas, and it's called Acqua di Gio by Giorgio
mm,
Armani. That is a floral fragrance. It has a
okay.
lot of florals in it. There's lily, there's jasminol, there's a lot of floral ingredients in it. And then subsequent to that, Christian Dior came out with a fragrance called Dior Homme. It has a lot of iris in it. It's a floral
Mm,
ingredient. You have brands like Moschino. They have a fragrance called Toy Boy, and that one has a
mm,
lot of rose in it. So it's amazing how you have all of these men's fragrances that contain floral ingredients, but if you were to ask somebody, they would say, "Oh no, isn't it that men wear woods and spices and resins and ambers and all that stuff, but women are the one who are
ah,
wearing the
the
florals
floral.
and whatever?" It's like, no, that's not true. A lot of times, you might end up picking up, like, take this one for example, Prada Paradox.
Right.
It has jasmine in it. There's pear. There's a hint of vanilla in the dried down, but you can find the same exact note breakdown in a men's fragrance. It's only the fact that it's housed in a pretty bottle and it's marketed for women. And you look at the ad campaign and there's a woman's face there. So it's like, oh, this is for women, isn't it? But what's to say that a gentleman can't pick up the fragrance and wear it? He certainly could, right?
Mm,
So I think that's a big misconception, which is why, as we enter the world of niche perfumes, you'll see that 9 out of 10 niche brands, when they
mhm.
release a fragrance, they just say it's unisex. It's unisex,
Ah,
right? I think it's still
right.
like the commercialized designer brands that are still putting out fragrances and saying this is for men, this is for women, because that's kind of the expectation among consumers. But when people
Mm,
start getting into like the more specialized brands, you'll see that 9 out of 10 perfumes that are being released are marketed as unisex.
right, right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Oh no, you're welcome. These questions are like I'm looking at it and I'm like, that is very profound. Like some people, what perfume boosts confidence?
Ooh, okay. So you don't want to wear anything too daring, something that pushes the proverbial boundaries or the envelope. You want to wear something with mass appeal. You want to wear something that's very easygoing, something that is going to have a very high compliment factor. Because here's the thing, when you're wearing a fragrance, you don't want to feel insecure. And you might end up picking up something, and I want to see if I have anything at my disposal here. Okay, so this is a beautiful fragrance. I think it's a
Okay.
masterpiece. It's by a brand called Memo Paris, and it's called
Okay.
African Leather. Now, this is a very dark, leathery, spicy fragrance. If I do 6 sprays of this, I'm not going to be able to leave the house and feel super confident. And I say that because I might encounter somebody who is just going to think I stink, right? Not to
Right.
say that this stinks. I think it's a
Right.
beautiful aroma, but maybe people don't like the smell of leather and spices, right? Like you mentioned working at that restaurant. But
Right.
if I put on something like, let's say this fragrance, Gucci Guilty Pour Love Edition, this
Right.
has a lot of citrus and orange blossom. Now, there are
Okay.
certain ingredients that more so than others have universal appeal. So if
Mm,
somebody wants to feel confident, they're going to wear Myself by Yves Saint Laurent. They're going to wear Bleu de Chanel by Chanel. They're going to wear Acqua di Gio by Giorgio Armani. They're going to wear Dior Homme by Christian Dior. They're going to wear Sauvage Eau de Parfum by Christian Dior. So there are certain fragrances that sell very, very well. And if you look at the reports from all of these places that sell them, they will say, oh, yeah, this is consistently in the top 10. And it's for a reason. It's because people wear
right.
it and it has that mass appeal versus wearing something that's a bit more daring, something with spices and resins and woods and smokes and ambers. And, these are great if you're, really a connoisseur and you're getting into
Mm.
fragrances and you're like, I don't want to wear what everybody else is wearing. That's totally fine. But, to wear it in an office setting, for example, is something that I would advise against.
I was gonna say, it's kind of like, it's great to have your own style of what you like to have, but maybe at work you should pick something appropriate and consider other people around you
Yeah.
versus like if you wanted to do something, going to a party or having a party at home, then you can wear your own fragrance that you like. So I think
Yeah.
we should consider that a little bit when it comes to perfume. Like you said, not that the smells, but maybe somebody don't like that strong smell, you know?
Listen,
S
Valerie, I know people who were sent home from work because of their fragrance.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, either
Really?
because they just picked something that was way too out there, or maybe they just happened to over apply on a certain day. I've heard stories about people being sent home from work,
Well,
100%.
well, then let's give a list of a couple of stuff that people shouldn't be going home because of their perfume. What would you recommend for those people? I know the confidence is good, but in an office setting, like what would you recommend? Something that could be
Okay.
pleasant.
So the first recommendation would be take a look at the concentration of the fragrance. Of
Okay.
course, a lot of this stuff is nebulous and a lot
Okay.
of brands kind of pick and choose what label they want to slap on their bottle, but generally speaking, an eau de cologne is going to be at the bottom in terms of
Okay.
the concentration of aromatic compounds. So there's going to be more alcohol relative to the oils. Now, a step up from that would be an eau de toilette. That's going to be a little bit stronger, usually in the vein of 10 to 15% oil. Eau de parfum is going to be between 15 to 20% oil. And then we have what's called extrait de parfum or pure parfum, and that could go as high as 30%. Typically, a lot of brands don't do more than that because it cuts into their profit margin. But if you're wearing, let's say, for example, a pure parfum or an
right?
extrait de parfum, if you do 8 to 10 sprays of something like that, people are going to notice you. And if you're possessing or if you're wearing a fragrance that possesses a very bold and aggressive DNA with some unconventional ingredients, you could potentially trigger somebody's allergies. Like I've heard,
Yeah.
when I was in education, at the beginning of every year, the nurse made it a point to mention to the staff that they should not be wearing fragrance in the building.
Mm,
And if they see students with body sprays or fragrance mists or anything like that, they should also be discouraged from wearing fragrances because you never know how it's going to
how
affect
it's
people
gonna.
nowadays. Even though these products are heavily regulated, there's this thing called the IFRA, which stands for the International Fragrance Association, and they're kind of like what the FDA is for food, but for perfumes.
For perfumes.
And they make sure that every product that's hitting the market on a commercial level has been heavily regulated. There's nothing in there that's going to cause some sort of adverse dermatological response, but you never know. Some people have underlying sensitivities where, yeah,
Right.
it might just be smelling something and they start wheezing or they have shortness of breath. So I think we have to be mindful of that. So the one piece of advice that I would give is look at the concentration. If it's an eau de toilette, it's generally safer to apply a little bit more. If it's an eau de parfum or a pure parfum, you don't need to do as many sprays and it will get you through the day.
That's great. That's great to know because, like you said, a lot of people, if they have an allergic reaction or something like that,
Yeah,
it matters. It really does matters.
it does. Yeah.
Um, so for somebody, not like yourself, like your cousin come in, like you own 1,000 perfume. For somebody that is just like perfume, how many bottle do you recommend before they go crazy and keep buying perfume? How many bottle is an average perfume enthusiast?
Amazing question. So people usually do it by season, by occasion, and by wardrobe. So I
Okay.
know some people who subscribe to the mindset of just have two bottles, one formal, one casual.
Okay.
I know some people who say, okay, I need a formal and a casual, but for each season. So they might have two, four, six, 8 bottles in their collection,
Okay.
right?
Uh-huh.
So I would say for somebody who is looking to diversify, for somebody
Okay.
who wants to go beyond the signature scent, and for somebody who wants to have somewhat of a fragrance wardrobe, for the average consumer, I don't think you need more than 8, right?
Okay.
So, for example, in the spring, whenever I think of spring, I think of flowers in bloom. So, you want maybe something a bit on the floral side of things, maybe an orange blossom, a tuberose, a gardenia, a jasmine. And then you can find one that has a hint of vanilla. So, it's a bit more playful,
Mm,
more casual. Or you can get one that has some woods, making it a little bit more sophisticated, refined, elegant, something that you can wear on a formal scenario. Now, in the summertime, citrus is quite heavy. You have aquatic
mm.
fragrances, you have oceanic fragrances, which will contain a compound known as kalone, which is used in a lot of fragrances that try to conjure up the feeling of being, in the water. Or you might have some playful fragrances like Beach Walk by Maison Margiela, which kind of smells like suntan lotion or
That
sunblock.
sounds pretty.
It's very, very pretty. Or you can have something a bit more tropical and it has ylang ylang in it. So it's a bit more on the floral side of things, or frangipani, for example, it reminds you of being on vacation. So I would say no more than 8. And then, of
8.
course, as you get into like the fall and winter, that's when the spices come out. Saffron,
Mm.
cumin, allspice, clove. I mean, you name it, right? There's no shortage of ingredients. But for starters, I would say start with 2, right? Especially if you don't have that much disposable income. Buy one that you would consider to be very casual, something that is
Mm.
very easy to wear, lighthearted, a lot of citrus, and then something that's on the formal side of things. So if you're a lady, maybe something with a pronounced floral edge, something with longevity. If you're a gentleman, maybe something that has a nice balance of citrus and woods. For that, I would recommend there's an Hermes fragrance called Terre d'Hermes. It
Mm.
has a lot of lemon and cedar wood. It's a very polished, elegant fragrance. It's been around for ages, but it still does very well among the gentlemen.
Do you like when you go places when people wear perfume, can you recognize their perfume as when you smell it? You like, I know which perfume you're wearing because you were so into it is?
Yeah, I do. But sometimes, and I've questioned, like, I'll give you an example. I was at a restaurant with a friend of mine yesterday, and I knew that the waiter was wearing Le Male by Jean Paul
Mm-hmm.
Gaultier. And as soon as I smelled it, I said, yeah, he's wearing Le Male, and I can tell you when it came out and the perfumer, and it has vanilla and mint and lavender. But sometimes you have all of these brands, like take this one, for example. This is a brand that reverse engineers fragrances. They're called Dossier.
Mm-hmm.
So what they'll do is they'll put a little bit of liquid into this apparatus known as a gas chromatograph, and it spits back the formula and it tells them exactly how the fragrance is made. So they'll take a fragrance from a really popular brand, they'll reverse engineer it, and then they'll put out a clone or dupe of that fragrance. So a lot of times I'll smell fragrance on somebody in public and I'll say, I know what you're wearing, but I don't know if you're wearing the original, if you're wearing an
Ah,
inspiration, or if you're wearing a perfume released by another brand that is what they call in the industry a twist. So they'll take the formula and they'll change it up a little bit so it's not 100% the same thing. And we have so many brands doing that. Like, for example, there's a brand called Creed. They
mm,
put out a fragrance, and I want to see if I have my bottle of it here. I'm gonna have a hard time locating it, but they put out a fragrance called Aventus. It
mm-hmm.
became one of the best-selling fragrances, huge compliment getter. And then there's the famous designer brand Montblanc. They
Yeah.
put out a fragrance called Explorer, and it smells almost 100% similar
Same.
to this other niche fragrance. And then there are other brands like Dossier that
Right.
will create their own version of both of those fragrances.
Both of
So
those.
when I smell it in the air, I'm like, I know what you're wearing, but I'm gonna have to narrow it down to like 4 or 5 fragrances. But I'm pretty confident I can guess it.
I can guess it. Yeah. With that being said, can we mix and match our perfume?
So a lot of people try to approach it with a more minimalist
Okay.
edge. So there are a lot of fragrances out there that will contain singular ingredients. So there's a brand called Juliet Has a Gun, and they have a perfume called Not a Perfume. And it contains one ingredient. It just
Okay.
smells very clean and musky. And for a lot of people, they consider that to be a good underbody or a good fragrance to layer with. There's another fragrance called Molecule 01 from a
Mm-hmm.
brand called Eccentric Molecules. And that also has a singular ingredient in it. It's called ISO-E Super. It has a very clean vetiver, which is a type of grass, cedarwood, citrusy type of a smell. And
Mm.
people love wearing it first. They'll wait a
And then
couple
you can
minutes and then they'll spray their actual choice on top of it. And kind of like when you're painting the walls, you put on the primer, the
primer
underbody
first.
first,
Yeah.
right? So it actually helps the fragrance last a little bit longer. So there are functional reasons why people like to layer or why they like to combine scents. Some people, they just like experimenting, right? They're like, well, I know this one is sweet and I know that one is sweet. So I'm going to wear a little bit of both just to see what the outcome is. I know a lot of perfumers would say, don't do that. They would say that a fragrance composition is very complicated and there are so many different ingredients that go into it and you never know how these ingredients will interact with one another. Like there's a very specific dosage that
Right.
needs to be adhered to for a lot of perfumers in order for it to receive clearance. But people still do it. It's fun, it's lighthearted, and if you
Fine.
want to wear more than one, I say go for it. It shouldn't be this thing where you have to follow a certain set of rules to make it happen. It needs to be very fun. So
Oh
whatever people
yeah.
want to do, I encourage it.
That's great. Where are the best places to apply perfume for last longing scents for men and for women?
So yeah, that's a really good question. And I have two responses to that. So the first one is a lot of people will say, especially sales associates, you want to apply to pulse points, which is your
Yes.
wrists, right? Where the veins sit very close to the surface of your skin and they generate heat. And it's the heat that allows the fragrance to evaporate and lift off your skin. So it would be your wrists. It would be the side of your neck, again, where you check for someone's pulse.
Pulse.
I personally love also applying fragrance on your nape, so on the
Okay.
back of your neck, because then you will leave what's known as a sillage or a scent trail. And sillage is a French word that refers to if you've ever seen like a bird's eye view of a ship that is
Yeah.
traveling in the ocean and there's that white trail of
White
foam
trail.
behind it. So
Or
in
airplane.
airplanes as
Yeah.
yeah, airplanes as well. And so people use the term sillage. So they say, yeah, you want to apply it to the back. So as you're walking, you will leave a scent trail. I also love applying fragrance to the hair because your hair produces oils and the
Mm.
fragrance will actually stick to the oils. And so I'm not saying overdo it, but maybe
Right,
one or
right, right,
two
right.
sprays and you will be able to smell your fragrance the entire day. Now, if it's a light colored liquid, I also suggest applying it to cotton fabrics. So
Okay.
I would do a few sprays on the shirt because um, the evolution of a perfume is a lot less dynamic on a shirt versus skin. So on skin, it might last you 6, 7, 8 hours. On shirts or clothing, it's going to last you days. I'm sure you've maybe, and I know myself included, and a lot of people will apply it on a shirt,
I
will
do
take
too.
it off, and then the very next day they'll smell it, and they're like, "Oh, I can still smell the perfume there." So that would be my suggestion. Pulse points, hair, back of the
Back
head,
in.
and if it's a light colored liquid that's not going to stain your
That's good.
clothing, also do a little bit on a cotton fabric.
Yeah, I do that on my clothes, and my daughter always, we are the same size. So every
Uh-huh.
time she wears my sweatshirt, she's like, oh my God, it smells like your perfume. But that was like 3 days ago or 2 days ago. So that's so true.
Oh, yeah,
Is
it
there,
lingers.
yeah, is there best time during the day or at evening to apply the perfume?
No. It all
I,
depends on what you're going to do or where you're going to go. A lot of people will say with certain fragrances that they don't like the opening, but they like the dry down. And I'll give you an example. There's a perfume called Musc Ravageur by Frederic Malle, and it has a lot of vanilla, a lot of resins, and it smells so warm and delicious and ambery, and it's such an amazing fragrance. It's so magnetic. But it also has clove in the opening. And a lot of people say, oh my God, why would the perfumer's name is Maurice Roussel. Why would the perfumer add clove in this fragrance? It's such a contrast to that beautiful vanilla. And so I know a lot of people who will spray the fragrance on. They hate the opening, but they say, you know what? In a half hour, I'm going to leave the house because that's when I know it's going to smell really, really good. So I think it's highly personal and highly individual, but I would say really there's no right or wrong time. Like I know people who wear perfume to bed, right? They
right,
say
right,
it
right, right,
makes me
right.
feel so good. So
Right,
I'm gonna apply this right before I go to sleep and I dream better, like I
right.
feel more relaxed in the morning or I'll wake. Sometimes it's just to prolong that feeling of smelling clean and like
Mm,
citrus ingredients, iris flower. A lot of these ingredients smell soapy, and it's because those raw materials are also used in the synthesis of soaps and a lot of like
yeah,
hygiene products. So it makes total sense, right? Like your shampoo is
yeah,
scented, right? Your
right,
body wash
right.
is scented. So there's no wrong time.
Yeah, you're right.
There's
But
no right time, excuse me.
yeah,
Right
there's
or
not
wrong time.
right or wrong time. But I do that sometime with some perfumes. I sprayed a little bit earlier than I wanted to go out because at first it had a little strong smell. I
Yeah.
like the smell myself, but I can know that it's a little strong. But as the day passed by, just you could see kind of calms down and smells prettier and prettier and prettier. So
Yeah. Yeah.
sometime I do that for the listeners, if they want to do that, maybe like 10 minutes or 15 minutes before they can go out of the house, they can do that. But I do that all the
Absolutely.
time with my perfumes just because I like it doing this way.
I agree.
Well, Uh, now I know there's a lot of perfume out there, but for 2025, can you give us three top perfume that you would recommend for women this year?
Ab Absolutely. So the first one that I would recommend, it's a bit more on the floral side of things, but it smells very elegant and very professional. So this is my alarm reminding me that I need to upload a video.
Oh,
So
okay.
this is how like I'm gonna do that later, of course, because I'm gonna prioritize this, of course. The three perfumes that I would recommend are Libre by Yves Saint Laurent.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful fragrance. There's a lot of orange blossom. There's a hint of vanilla, especially when you go with Libre Le Parfum. So it's a bit stronger, it's a bit sweeter. It has such beautiful charisma about it. The second one that I would recommend for the versatility alone, you can wear this one dressed up, dressed down. It's Prada Paradox. And if you're looking for a more floral expression, there's also the new one, which is called Prada Paradox Virtual Flower. So that
Mm.
would be the second one that I would recommend. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And the third one that I would recommend is, and I'm going to call this the special occasion fragrance. The one
Mhm.
where if you want to make a statement, you really want to turn heads, you want to walk in the room and you're the center of attention, you're the focal point of everything. There's a brand based out of Oman and they're called Amouage. They have a beautiful perfume called Guidance, and it's a very sort of intoxicating, fruity, floral perfume with some unconventional ingredients. And this Amani brand uses some of the finest incense that you can find in the world. And that's
Wow.
kind of like the motif in a lot of their fragrances. So it adds this dynamic um, of like mystery and allure and intrigue. And it's a very sophisticated fragrance. So I would say um, Libre by Yves Saint Laurent. I would say Prada Paradox and Guidance by Amouage. Three
Oh, we're gonna.
amazing fragrances. I will always recommend them.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna get this right spelling of stuff and I'm putting it on a show note because our listeners definitely wanna know that.
I love it.
Yeah, all those name, all those stuff. Just kidding me? I probably wouldn't remember anything. As I'm listening, I'm gonna go back to the recording and I'm gonna write it all down. Um,
Awesome.
Before I let you go, what does inner power means to you?
Oh, I love that. So, inner power, I think, it's all about self-concept. What you believe to be true about yourself is what will manifest in your external reality. A lot of times we go into certain things or tasks or events or situations and we tell ourselves, I can't do this. I don't know if I'm built for this. I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to tie it back to something that I personally witnessed. Shortly after I graduated high school, I was in a bowling league. And I joined this league with my brother and a couple of my friends.
Mhm.
And we were playing against the best team. And there was money at stake. And my friend comes up to me. I'm not going to say his name in case he listens to this. My friend comes up to me and he says, it's the 10th frame. He was the anchor, which means he's the last one to bowl. And he goes, Steve, I don't know. I'm going to get a gutter. I said, you're not going to get a gutter. He goes, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to get a gutter. And he curves the ball so much. And the oil conditions on the lane that day, they were so oily. But he throws the ball and he gets a gutter. And I said, go up there, complete the frame. All we need is 6 pins. Even if you just throw it straight down the middle, you don't have to worry about curving it or anything. No fancy techniques, no work or whatever. He goes, I don't know, man. I just feel like I'm going to get a gutter. He goes up again, he gets another gutter, and we lose the game. We lost by 6 pins. And I just remember thinking to myself, he convinced himself.
You
He
did.
was absolutely sure of it. And, it's amazing how many times you can leave the house. And if you just spend time in a state of gratitude, or you have these positive affirmations and you grant yourself this inner power and you say, you know what? I am worthy of this. I know that I can do this. I am the exception. I believe in myself. I know that I am the best person suited for this job or this role or this career or whatever the case may be. The mind, whatever you impress upon the subconscious mind, must harden into fact. And the universe, as Paulo Coelho says in his famous book, The Alchemist, is the universe will conspire in your favor, but you need to believe it. If you don't
Yeah.
believe it yourself, if you're not committed to it 100%, then it might not happen. But as long as you believe in yourself that you can do something, you will do it. And so inner power is all about self confidence. It's about believing in yourself. It's about self concept. And it's about, feeding yourself the right information that you need to hear. Not just you want to hear, but you need to hear.
Beautiful said. Beautiful, beautiful. And I'm encouraging my listeners to definitely look at the perfume and fragrance differently. completely differently after this episode. I know I will. And like you said, to assign it to empower you, to give you self worth, to give you love, to give you confidence, to give you comfort, to give you that boldness, that courage that you need. You have all of that within yourself. So if it takes a perfume to bring that out of you and just to remind you of that, I would say go for it.
I love that. And as proponents of the law of attraction always say, you can't create something out of nothing. Everything that you want already exists. You just have to become a vibrational match for it. And you raise your
Yeah.
vibration by having gratitude, having love, having self-acceptance, and just thinking positive thoughts. So you put it beautifully.
Thank you so much, Steve, for taking time and for being here and explaining all of this to us and answering these questions. I learned so much from you. I really did. And like I
Thank
said,
you.
I'm a perfume freak, but I can't imagine what the listener, I can't wait to bring you back because this is what we do. We have you over here, you talk about it, they listen to you, and then I'm going to get bombarded with more questions. And I would love to bring you back and we can discuss even further on how we can use the perfume for bettering our life.
I will always be available at your disposal. So whenever you'd like to have me back, I'm here.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Of course. Thank you. Pleasure's all mine.